In the year 132 AD, a bronze dragon spit out a bronze ball, and Chinese officials knew, somewhere hundreds of miles away, the Earth was tearing itself apart. No wires, no sensors, no electronics, just engineering so precise that modern seismologists stood baffled when they tried to recreate it. And that's just number 20, because what you're about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about ancient technology. The Chinese weren't just ahead of their time. In some ways, they're still ahead of ours. Over the next few minutes, you'll witness 20 inventions that defy logic, technologies that shouldn't exist, engineering so advanced that when European scholars first encountered them, they refused to believe ancient minds could create such things. From drilling deeper than modern skyscrapers are tall using nothing but bamboo, to creating materials we still can't perfectly replicate today. Each invention will be more shocking than the last. And the final one? It'll completely change how you see human capability. This is not the ancient world you learned about in school. This is something else entirely. Number 20. The dragon that detected earthquakes. Picture this. The Han Dynasty, 132 AD. An ornate bronze vessel stands in the imperial palace, 8 dragon heads jutting from its sides, mouths open, each holding a bronze ball. Below them, 8 bronze toads wait with open mouths. Then, without warning, a dragon releases its ball. The metallic clang echoes through the hall. Officials immediately dispatch riders westward, because polymath Zhang Heng's seismoscope has just detected an earthquake 400 miles away. Days later, messengers confirm it. A massive quake devastated a distant province. The world wouldn't see another seismological instrument for over 1,700 years. Zhang Heng's device used a pendulum mechanism so sophisticated that modern engineers spent decades trying to understand how it could detect directional ground waves with such precision. We can build satellites that monitor tectonic activity. We can predict earthquakes with supercomputers, but we still can't recreate the elegant simplicity of Zhang Heng's bronze dragon. But that was only the beginning of China's impossible engineering. Number 19. Paper that changed civilization. Around 105 AD, a court official named Kai Lun took tree bark, hemp, old rags, and fishing nets, waste materials nobody wanted, and transformed them into something that would revolutionize human communication forever. The West wouldn't discover papermaking for another 1,000 years, relying instead on expensive parchment and fragile papyrus. But Kai Lun's process was so efficient, so brilliant, that its fundamental principles remain unchanged today. He soaked plant fibers, beat them into pulp, spread the mixture on screens, and pressed them into sheets. Modern paper mills use the exact same core technique, just scaled up with machinery. The chemistry hasn't changed. The physics hasn't changed. Because Kai Lun had already perfected it. Within centuries, China became a civilization of documented knowledge, while Europe still carved important messages into stone. And yet, compared to what comes next, paper seems almost simple. Number 18. Printing that democratized knowledge. Imagine carving an entire Buddhist sutra backwards into a wooden block, inking it perfectly, and pressing it onto paper with such precision that every character transfers flawlessly. Now imagine doing this for a book. The Diamond Sutra, printed in 868 AD, is the world's oldest surviving printed book, created 600 years before Gutenberg's printing press. But China didn't stop there. By 1040 AD, inventor Bi Sheng created movable type printing using clay characters that could be rearranged infinitely. Each character could be used again and again. Ideas could spread like wildfire. Knowledge became accessible. The West celebrates Gutenberg, but he was reinventing technology China had mastered 4 centuries earlier. And here's the mind-bending part. Chinese movable type was actually harder to develop because the Chinese written language has thousands of characters, not just 26 letters. They solved a more complex problem first. What happened next stunned historians. Number 17. The compass that guided empires. Deep in the Han Dynasty, around 200 BC, Chinese metallurgists discovered that certain stones, when suspended freely, always pointed the same direction. They called it south-pointing stone, lodestone, naturally magnetized magnetite. But they didn't just marvel at it, they understood it. By the Song Dynasty, Chinese sailors were using sophisticated magnetic compasses for maritime navigation, while European ships still hugged coastlines, terrified of losing sight of land. These weren't crude needles floating in water. Chinese compasses featured intricate designs, marked with the 24 directions used in feng shui and navigation. They understood magnetic declination, the difference between true north and magnetic north, centuries before Western science acknowledged it. Chinese treasure fleets crossed the Indian Ocean to Africa in the 1400s, using compass technology so reliable that admirals trusted their lives to it. Meanwhile, Columbus wouldn't sail until 1492, and even then, many of his contemporaries thought he'd sail off the edge of the world. And this is where it gets unbelievable. Number 16. Gunpowder, the accidental apocalypse. Taoist alchemists in the 9th century were obsessed with immortality. They mixed sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter, hoping to create an elixir of eternal life. Instead, they created an elixir of death. The mixture exploded. Rather than abandoning the discovery in horror, Chinese inventors weaponized it. By the 10th century, they'd created fire lances, bamboo tubes packed with gunpowder that shot flames and shrapnel at enemies. Then came bombs, rockets, and eventually guns. The Mongols spread gunpowder technology westward during their conquests, and it transformed warfare forever. Castles became obsolete. Knights in armor became targets. Entire military doctrines collapsed overnight. Yet here's the paradox. The Chinese invented gunpowder, trying to preserve life, and instead created the technology that would define human conflict for the next millennium. We've refined explosives, we've built nuclear weapons, but we're still just playing with fire that ancient Taoist monks accidentally unleashed. But the next invention changes everything. Number 15. Porcelain, the unbreakable monopoly. For nearly 1,000 years, China held a secret so valuable that emperors guarded it with their lives. Porcelain. The Chinese discovered that by firing a specific mixture of kaolin clay and patunci stone at temperatures exceeding 1,200 degrees Celsius, they could create a material unlike anything else on Earth. It was translucent, yet stronger than ordinary pottery. It was white, yet could be painted with colors that would never fade. It rang like a bell when struck. European nobility became obsessed with Chinese porcelain, paying fortunes for single pieces. They tried desperately to recreate it. They failed. For centuries, they failed. Chinese artisans understood that different minerals melted and bonded at precise temperatures, creating glass-like surfaces at the molecular level. European kilns couldn't achieve these temperatures. Even when they did, they lacked the clay. China exported millions of pieces worldwide, building vast wealth on a technology monopoly. The West didn't successfully create true porcelain until the 1700s, and even today, the finest porcelain still comes from China. Some ancient knowledge was never surpassed, only eventually matched. What happened next stunned historians. Number 14. Cast iron, melting the impossible. Around 500 BC, Chinese metallurgists achieved something that should have been impossible with ancient technology. They melted iron. Not just heated it to hammer into shape like blacksmiths everywhere else, but actually liquefied it, poured it into molds, and cast it into complex shapes. The secret? Blast furnaces that achieved temperatures of 1,200 degrees Celsius by pumping air through charcoal with sophisticated bellows systems. Europe wouldn't develop blast furnaces for another 1,800 years. With cast iron, China created industrial-scale production. They built massive plowshares that revolutionized agriculture. They cast iron pots that improved food preparation. They forged weapons and tools with a quality that made Chinese iron legendary across Asia. But here's what makes it truly remarkable. They also invented the process to convert brittle cast iron into malleable wrought iron by carefully controlling heating and cooling cycles, manipulating carbon content at the molecular level without ever seeing a molecule. They understood metallurgy through pure observation and experimentation. We have electron microscopes and computer simulations. They had genius, and this is where it gets truly shocking. Number 13. Drilling to hell's doorstep. Sichuan province, around 300 AD. Chinese engineers wanted salt. Salt deposits lay deep underground, dissolved in brine. So they decided to drill. Not shallow holes, but shafts plunging deep into the earth. Using bamboo cables, iron drill bits, and human-powered winches, they bored holes over 1,000 meters deep, deeper than the Empire State Building is tall. They developed percussion drilling techniques, dropping heavy bits repeatedly to pulverize rock, then using bamboo tubes to extract the debris. They reinforced boreholes with bamboo casing to prevent collapse. They even discovered natural gas while drilling and learned to capture it, piping it through bamboo to evaporate brine water and crystallize salt. This was in the 3rd century. Europe's deepest mines during the Renaissance barely reached 100 meters. American oil drillers in the 1800s studied ancient Chinese techniques because their methods worked better than modern approaches. Those bamboo cables, they didn't corrode. They flexed without breaking. They were lighter than steel but strong enough to lift tons of material from depths that would kill any man who fell in. We drilled deeper now, but we needed steel, motors, and hydraulics to surpass what the Chinese did with bamboo and human ingenuity. But that was just the warm-up for what's coming. Number 12. The Segmental Arch Bridge, 602 AD. Master craftsman Li Chun faced an impossible challenge: build a bridge across the Xiao River that could withstand floods, support massive weight, and last for centuries. His solution? The Anji Bridge, the world's first segmental arch bridge. Instead of a semicircular arch like every other bridge in existence, Li Chun created a shallow arc, a segment of a larger circle. This radical design reduced the bridge's weight by using less material while actually increasing its strength. But the genius doesn't stop there. He added 4 small arches in the spandrels, the space above the main arch, which reduced weight further and allowed floodwaters to pass through instead of smashing into solid stone. The Anji Bridge still stands today, 13 centuries later, having survived floods, earthquakes, and the weight of countless travelers. It remains the oldest standing bridge in China. Europe wouldn't build segmental arch bridges until the 14th century, 700 years later. Modern engineers have analyzed Li Chun's mathematics and found his calculations were flawless. He understood load distribution, material compression, and hydraulic force without differential equations or computer models. He just knew. And the next invention will blow your mind. Number 11. The Mechanical Clock of Susong, 1092 AD. Astronomer. Susong completed a machine that defied imagination, a 40-foot-tall astronomical clock tower powered entirely by water. This wasn't just a clock. It was a planetarium, a calendar, and a computer made of bronze gears. Water poured into scoops on a massive wheel. When a scoop filled, it triggered an escapement mechanism, a regulated release that rotated the wheel one position, advanced the gears, and rang bells to mark time. The tower displayed the positions of stars, tracked celestial movements, and predicted eclipses. Mechanical figures emerged to strike drums and gongs at precise intervals. Susong's clock used a chain drive, the same principle that powers bicycles, 6 centuries before chain drives appeared in Europe. When Mongol invasions destroyed the original, Chinese engineers rebuilt it from Susong's detailed written instructions, proving the design was reproducible, not a one-time miracle. This machine represented an understanding of mechanical engineering, precision manufacturing, and astronomical mathematics that Europe wouldn't achieve until the Renaissance. And here's the haunting part. We have Susong's complete technical manual, thousands of words describing every gear, every measurement, every calculation. Ancient knowledge preserved so completely that modern engineers built working replicas by following instructions written 900 years ago. But the next one is where things get really crazy. Number 10. The seed drill that fed millions. Around 250 BC, Chinese farmers faced a crisis, feeding an exploding population with limited farmland. Their solution? The multi-tube seed drill, a device that wouldn't appear in Europe for over 2,000 years. This wasn't a simple plow. It was a precision agricultural machine pulled by oxen, featuring multiple tubes that simultaneously created furrows, dropped seeds at perfect intervals, and covered them with soil, all in a single pass. Seeds planted at the correct depth with proper spacing grew stronger, yielded more, and required less maintenance. Chinese farmers could plant entire fields in hours instead of days. Food production exploded. The civilization grew. But here's what makes it genius. The seed drill also reduced waste. Broadcasting seeds by hand meant birds ate many before they could germinate. The drill buried them immediately, protecting them. It controlled distribution, eliminating patches of overcrowded or sparse growth. When Jethro Tull invented the seed drill in the 18th century England, historians celebrated it as revolutionary agricultural technology. They didn't know the Chinese had perfected it 2 millennia earlier. We have GPS-guided tractors now, but the fundamental principle remains identical. Controlled seed placement increases yield. The Chinese understood this when Rome was still a republic. And things are about to get even more shocking. Number 9. suspension bridges over impossible chasms. Southwest China, rugged mountains, gorges plunging thousands of feet down. Travel was impossible, until Chinese engineers began stringing cables across voids that made men's souls freeze with fear. By the 7th century AD, China was building suspension bridges using iron chains and bamboo cables, spans that stretched hundreds of feet across river canyons and mountain passes. The Lanjin Bridge, built in 65 AD, used iron chains centuries before Europe even conceived of using metal cables for bridges. These weren't primitive rope bridges. They featured carefully calculated cable tensions, load-bearing towers, and road surfaces that could support merchants, soldiers, and pack animals. The engineering mathematics required to build suspension bridges is staggering, calculating cable catenary curves, determining tower height and spacing, ensuring proper anchoring to withstand dynamic loads and wind forces. The Chinese solved these problems through observation and testing, building models, measuring results, and scaling up. When the West finally built suspension bridges in the 1800s, they thought they were pioneering new technology. They weren't. They were rediscovering it. But that's nothing compared to what comes next. Number 8. The wheelbarrow that moved civilization. Here's something that sounds too simple to be revolutionary: a single-wheeled cart. Yet around 100 AD, the Chinese invention of the wheelbarrow transformed logistics, construction, and military campaigns. But this wasn't the wheelbarrow you know. Chinese wheelbarrows placed the wheel in the center, directly beneath the load, allowing one person to transport weights that would require 2 people carrying a sedan chair or 4 people hauling baskets. Armies could move supplies faster. Construction workers could transport bricks and mortar more efficiently. Farmers could haul harvest to market without pack animals. The genius was in the physics. Centering the wheel under the load created perfect balance, eliminating the heavy lifting required when weight sits in front of the wheel, as in European designs. A single design change that tripled efficiency. The wheelbarrow reached Europe eventually, probably through military contact with China, but it took 1,000 years. Sometimes the simplest inventions are the hardest to conceive because they seem too obvious once you see them. Nobody thinks to question why we carry things a certain way, until someone shows us a better method, and we're just getting started. Number 7. The crossbow, democracy and warfare. Around 400 BC, Chinese weaponsmiths created something that terrified nobility across Asia, a weapon that made combat training nearly irrelevant: the crossbow. Unlike bows that required years of practice to master, crossbows could be operated by peasant conscripts after an afternoon of instruction. Pull the string back using mechanical leverage, lock it in place, load a bolt, aim, pull the trigger. A farmer could kill an armored warrior at 200 yards. The social implications were staggering. Military power was no longer restricted to aristocratic classes who could afford years of archery training. Chinese crossbows featured sophisticated bronze trigger mechanisms with multiple moving parts working in perfect harmony. They incorporated stirrups for drawing the string using leg strength. They had adjustable sights. Some siege crossbows were so powerful they required multiple soldiers operating windlasses to cock them and could pierce multiple layers of armor. When Macedonian armies finally encountered Chinese crossbows centuries later, they were shocked by their power and precision. Europe would eventually develop crossbows independently, but Chinese versions remained superior for centuries, featuring better metallurgy, more sophisticated trigger assemblies, and greater power-to-weight ratios. What happened next will leave you speechless. Number 6. The Aeoli pile, ancient steam power. While the Greek inventor Hero of Alexandria gets credit for the first steam engine, Chinese engineers were simultaneously exploring steam power with their own designs around the 1st century AD. But more importantly, they understood practical applications. They created rotating mechanisms powered by steam for astronomical instruments and automated devices. They built systems where steam pressure moved components with precision. Yet they never built steam locomotives or factories. Why? Because they didn't need to. China's advanced canal systems and human labor infrastructure worked efficiently. But the knowledge existed. The principles were understood. It's a haunting historical footnote. Ancient China possessed the technological knowledge to trigger an industrial revolution 1,000 years before Europe, but chose not to pursue it. Sometimes invention isn't just about capability. It's about necessity and societal priorities. When Europe finally harnessed steam power in the 1700s, it transformed the world. But the Chinese had already asked and answered the question: Is this worth building? They concluded other technologies served their civilization better. But the next invention takes us even deeper. Number 5. Acupuncture, mapping the invisible. Imagine mapping a system inside the human body that nobody else could see, creating detailed charts of pathways carrying energy through flesh, and developing techniques to manipulate these pathways to heal disease. Around 100 BC, Chinese medical practitioners codified acupuncture into a complete medical system based on the meridian network, 12 primary channels and 8 extraordinary vessels carrying qi through the body. They identified 365 acupuncture points corresponding to the days of the year, each one a specific location where needles could influence the flow of energy. Western medicine dismissed acupuncture as superstition for centuries, until research began revealing something extraordinary. Acupuncture points correspond to locations where nerves and blood vessels converge. Stimulating these points triggers measurable physiological responses: endorphin release, inflammation reduction, neural activity changes visible on brain scans. Modern ultrasound studies have found evidence of distinct tissue planes along meridian pathways. Whether the ancient Chinese were detecting bioelectrical signals, following fascial planes, or mapping something else entirely remains debated. But they created a complete medical system that works, documented it in texts over 2,000 years old, and passed it through generations. We're still trying to fully understand what they discovered, and this is where everything you thought you knew changes. Number 4. The moldboard plow, engineering the earth. Around the 3rd century BC, Chinese agricultural engineers revolutionized farming with a simple curved blade attached to a plow, the moldboard. This curve didn't just cut through soil like every other plow in history. It lifted the soil, turned it completely over, and laid it back down. Why does this matter? Because turning soil buries weeds, aerates compacted earth, and incorporates organic matter deep where plant roots can access it. Crop yields skyrocketed. Fields that once produced meager harvests suddenly became productive. The moldboard plow's curve had to be precisely calculated. Too steep, and it required excessive force to pull; too shallow, and it failed to turn the soil completely. Chinese engineers perfected these calculations through iterative testing. They also developed iron moldboards that resisted wear from abrasive soil, creating tools that lasted years instead of months. Europe wouldn't develop moldboard plows until the medieval period, a millennium later, and when they did, it transformed European agriculture so dramatically that historians credit it as essential to ending the Dark Ages. Population grew. Civilization advanced. All because of a curved blade that turned dirt upside down. But the final 3 will completely shatter your reality. Number 3. The astronomical armillary sphere. Zhang Heng, that genius who built the earthquake detector, also created something even more mind-bending around 117 AD. A water-powered armillary sphere that automatically tracked the movements of stars across the sky. This mechanical representation of the heavens featured nested rings representing celestial coordinates, with star positions marked precisely along each ring. But here's where it transcends ancient engineering. Zhang Heng's device rotated automatically, powered by water flowing at a carefully controlled rate, keeping pace with the Earth's rotation, so users could track stellar positions throughout the night without manual adjustment. He built a machine that understood celestial mechanics, implemented mechanical timekeeping, and combined both into an astronomical computer 1,000 years before Europe conceived such devices were possible. The implications are staggering. Zhang Heng understood that the Earth rotates. He calculated its rotational speed. He built precision gears to replicate this rotation. All of this in the 2nd century AD. We look at ancient peoples and assume they saw the sky as mystery. Zhang Heng saw it as mathematics and built machines to prove it. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Number 2. Repeating crossbows. Ancient automatic weapons. Imagine a crossbow that doesn't require manual reloading. A weapon where you simply slide a lever back and forth and bolt after bolt fires in rapid succession. The Zhuge crossbow, named after legendary strategist Zhuge Liang, but possibly invented even earlier, was essentially an ancient machine gun. A magazine mounted on top held 10 bolts. Each forward stroke of the lever cocked the bow and loaded a new bolt. Each return stroke released it. A skilled operator could fire 10 bolts in 15 seconds. In an era when archers might lose 6 arrows per minute, this rate of fire was devastating. Armies equipped with repeating crossbows could create walls of projectiles that annihilated advancing troops. The mechanism was sophisticated. A wooden lever system integrated a cocking mechanism, a feeding mechanism, and a trigger release into a seamless operational cycle. It sacrificed power for speed. Bolts lacked the penetration of heavy crossbow quarrels. But in massed combat, overwhelming volume of fire trumped individual shot power. We think of automatic weapons as modern inventions, products of industrial age engineering and modern chemistry. But the principle, rapid, repeatable fire through mechanized reloading, was understood and implemented over 1800 years ago. And now, the invention that changes everything you thought you knew about ancient capabilities. Number 1. The seismograph network. Ancient Internet of Things. This isn't just about Zhang Heng's earthquake detector. It's about what China did with it. The Han Dynasty didn't build one seismograph and call it done. They created a network. Multiple devices strategically placed across the empire, all reporting seismic activity to a central administration. When a dragon spit its ball, officials knew the direction. But with multiple seismographs detecting the same event, they could triangulate the epicenter, estimate magnitude, and dispatch relief before news of the disaster even arrived through conventional messengers. This was distributed sensor networking, the fundamental principle behind the Internet of Things, implemented 1800 years before the Internet existed. They understood that data from multiple synchronized sensors creates actionable intelligence impossible from a single observation point. They built an infrastructure to collect, analyze, and act on that intelligence at a civilizational scale. No electricity, no telecommunications, just bronze, water, and systematic thinking. We live in a world of sensor networks, real-time data analysis, and predictive modeling. We think this is modern innovation. But the ancient Chinese were already doing it. They just used different tools for the same fundamental insight. Networked observation creates power that individual perception cannot achieve. So here's what we know. Ancient China didn't just create isolated inventions, they built technological systems. They understood principles we think of as modern, mass production, mechanized agriculture, automatic weapons, sensor networks, precision engineering. They didn't have our materials or our mathematics, but they had something perhaps more powerful, the ability to observe, to test, to refine, and to think in systems. We look backward and see primitives. We should be looking backward and seeing genius, because some of these inventions, we still use the exact same principles today. We've just wrapped them in steel and silicon and convinced ourselves we invented them. If this completely changed how you see ancient civilizations, there's a channel full of forgotten history waiting for you. Hit subscribe. Because the past wasn't the dark age we've been taught, it was brilliant. And we're only beginning to understand just how brilliant it truly was.